Hello, everyone. This is going to be a wonderful call. I unfortunately can't hear you all, but I'm assuming we have quite a number of people on the call at this point already. And I want to truly welcome you to this Gaia U Thrive call, Gaia Radio call. My name is Kirsten Liegman, and I am the Registrar and Director of Operations for Gaia University. We have just had an incredible and overwhelming response to this call, and it's been just wonderful, and I thank those of you who had some technical glitches for being patient with us. At the moment, so as I said, all of our mics are off, and we will be handing it to the different people who will be talking, and you will be getting some technical instruction in a moment on how to ask questions when Evon has finished his presentation. So we're going to give it just a couple of minutes to make sure everybody has called in. And so while we wait, I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of Gaia University, who we are. So Gaia University was founded over 5 years ago, and we are an online international university founded on the permaculture principles. We offer a variety of programs, our flagship one being our degree programs, which are Bachelors of Science, Masters of Science, and postmasters graduate diplomas. We also recently just added diploma programs, of which the Diploma in Thriving is one of them, and then some certificate programs as well, each of those being lesser in duration or workload. All of our programs are based in the action learning methodology, which means all of our associates work on projects of their choosing that make their hearts sing anywhere in the world that they wish. And they, for the duration of their program, they're under the guidance of a main advisor and a variety of other advisors, and they document the work that they're doing in the field, actually implementing real-world eco-social projects that we hope will improve the world. And this documentation is how they get evaluated on and eventually earn their degrees or their diplomas. Gaia Radio is a part of what we offer to our associates on a regular basis. There's a variety of different calls, and it is our way of providing content to our associates. If you're interested in hearing more about Gaia University, we have scheduled a virtual open house on Friday, January 27th at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, noon Eastern Time, and we will be sending out some information about that. So if you're interested, be on the lookout for that. So it is now 4 minutes after, so we hope that everybody who wants to make it to the call has come on now. So I'm going to hand it off briefly to Jennifer, who is our IT goddess in the back there, making sure that this call works smoothly. So Jennifer, would you please take it?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kirsten, for that awesome introduction. And again, my name is Jennifer, and I handle both setting up our sort of choice of who our guest speakers are for the Thrive Call series and also the Maestro platform. So really quickly, I'm going to tell you how we're going to operate with our questions. So if you have any questions related to IT, you will press the number 1 key on your phone or on Skype or cell phone or however it is that you're calling into this program. So again, that will be a number 1 key on your phone or keypad, and that will be for IT questions. If you have a question for our guest speaker, you'll press a number 2. And the way our call is set up is that about 15 to 30 minutes into the call, we are going to have scheduled time for questions. So if you have a question for the speaker, we may have that wait until the scheduled time for questions and answers. So again, a 1 for IT and a 2 for content. And I will remind you about this later on in the call, too, as a number of people haven't joined us yet. Okay, that's all I wanted to say on IT right now. If you do have a question, I will say that Ava Klinger, who helps us with the IT, will put you into a private breakout, and she will do her best to meet whatever IT needs that you're having. Okay, Kirsten, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. I'm just going to briefly introduce you to this Thrive series. You may be tracking Thrive, the unconventional documentary that lifts the veil from the increasingly visible global consolidation of power. Each of our Thrive Now calls will explore solutions offered in the film, then step boldly forward into applying tools and strategies towards empowered action. Our calls draw on professionals interviewed in the Thrive film from our own Gaia University Advisory Board and from our extended network. So each month, we invite you to join Gaia University for an engaging and empowering call series with leading-edge practitioners in the many fields of thriving. Call topics and speakers will cover a diverse range of fields around transforming old and emerging new cultures. And these calls are free. For this month, today's Thrive Now webcast, we are truly fortunate to have Thrive pioneer Evon Peters. Evon is a former Netsai Gwich'in chief of Arctic Village and founder of the Indigenous Leadership Institute. He has over 15 years' experience working with indigenous youth, organizations, and tribes implementing culturally based solutions. Today, Evon will be speaking on Be Who You Are and All Can Be As It Should. Welcome, Evon.
Hello. So it looks like that I'm on board here. It's kind of odd being in a system where I'm the only one able to talk and I'm not able to hear the voices of people responding. As I start out, I guess I'll introduce myself. When I was going to begin the call and we were doing the prep, they were asking how to pronounce Netsai Gwich'in, and I thought it might be nice for you to hear a little bit of my language. It's a language that's spoken by about 800 people, and there's about 8,000 Gwich'in people now, maybe 9,000 in the world. So by numbers, we're a small tribe from northern Alaska and northeastern Alaska and northwestern Canada. But Shalak Nai Shojri Von Peter Oji Vashain Ogwats Anithli, that's Igwich Anithli, that's Aithi, I Jewishithli, it's Anishig and Jitshuithli. And I wanted to start by thanking you all for taking the time to join us on this call. It's something that's both really exciting for me as a first-time webinar speaker, and also brought a little bit of nervousness to me as well when we were realizing that there was such a great response to the call. As I kind of begin my talk today, my intention is to just share a little bit of my thinking, some reflections that I've kind of garnered from my life, and then open it up to conversations and questions, I should say, because we have a short period of time. But I'm truly a lover of dialogue and a lover of listening. I think I've spent a lot of my life actually listening to people, both youth, the elders, and a lot of the communities that I've been blessed to be in my lifetime. And you know, it's part of the blessing, I suppose, that we have in life, the ability to be able to sometimes spend the time to listen to one another. But I'd like to start with something that I wrote yesterday. Yesterday, as we were reflecting on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I was also kind of reflecting on the significance and role of leaders throughout history, people who stood up and, in many cases, consciously putting their lives on the line in order to bring forward messages, bring forward inspiration, bring forward ideas. And so I want to begin with just this little, it's actually a few sentences that I wrote and put on my Facebook page yesterday, but I wanted to read it as I begin my talk today. So what I wrote yesterday was this: Unless we choose to do something differently, we can expect similar results. When we understand the connection between our attitudes, actions, and life experiences, we can navigate with intention. Nothing besides our eventual physical passing is a given, but we can diminish the potential for suffering and increase the potential for a balanced, peaceful, and fulfilling life. It can be as simple as acting kindly, making an apology, or giving thanks. It can be as complex as working to end exploitation and oppression from a source of love. And I wrote actually just below that in the, on Facebook, for those of you who are on that, in the comment page, that I put this in honor of those who came before us, inspired by this day when we are reminded of the tragedy of persecution brought upon those in history who are sharing wisdom, love, insight, and guidance to another way of living in relation to one another and the land. And I think a lot of what I would like to share with you today speaks to that, but in particular through my life experiences. And it's, recently I've been saying, that the story that we all know best is our own story because we've lived, each moment of it. And I think we could all trace back to the earliest moments of our awakening consciousness and awareness and the different stages that we were able to develop through over the course of our life as we garner understanding about what it means to be who we are and to show up as we are in the world. And so I want to just share a little bit of that in relationship to the topic that I put forward for the talk today, and as it relates to some of the work and the ideas that were brought forward through Thrive as well. I want to begin with me as a teenager. If you're interested in learning more about some of my story, I actually wrote a recent U.S. Congress Senate testimony that you can see online on my website. But for here, I'm going to speak specifically to some things that weren't necessarily in that testimony that was already in a public record now. So I grew up basically not living a very easy life with a single mother, going to the food banks for food and facing a lot of the similar situations that people face in this country when they live in what they refer to as the ghettos, the low-income housing complexes. And when I was in the urban areas, with my mother, who was a single mother, I lived with her in those sorts of places. But I was also very lucky at a young age to have been sent, at I think about 5 years old, my first time up to the villages where my grandparents come from. My grandmother was Catherine Peter, and my grandfather was Stephen Peters Sr. They're both passed now, but they both got to live long lives to be 93 years old, both of them. And I often say that I hope that I get to live such a full life as they got to live, to get to be able to see their great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren and come to be. But I got to grow up basically with them up in these remote tribes in northern Alaska. The village that I claim as my home is Washainko in my language. In English, it's a Arctic village, and it's a couple hundred miles from the nearest road. When I was growing up there, no electricity, no running water. There was about less than 100 people that lived out there. There was a couple winters, I think, when I was a kid where it was 65 below zero Fahrenheit for about a week at a time. Growing up there, though, I was able to experience the world in such a unique way in that we're so aware of our environment and our surroundings all of the time, because every day you were outdoors, hauling wood, hauling water, hunting, fishing, taking hikes up in the mountains around the land. In the extreme cold, you're so aware of our vulnerability of life as people and how dependent we are on the nature around us to provide for us to survive, and how dependent we are on one another. And I got to experience at that young age what it feels like to be truly free. And I could give a whole lecture just on that feeling alone, a whole talk on that, but it's something that I really hold dearly to, and it ties to the topic of this talk. And so I grew up in between those two types of experiences, getting to live in the last of the days where there was dog teams that brought us around on the land. Our language was the primary language being spoken in my village at the time, and also getting to grow up in an urban ghetto setting and kind of getting to see and experience the clear difference between those two ways of living, ways of life, ways of being, and ways of thinking that came along with each of those different frameworks. And by the time I was 13, my mother had moved us down into the city of Fairbanks so that I can get a better Western education. By that time, I had received a pretty good foundation in my culture and our way of life, our philosophy, our worldview, and in a lot of the practices of living from the land. But my mother also was very adamant about wanting me to be able to be successful in a Western framework as well. So she brought me down, and around that time it was when I first started to really, I think go through what we all go through naturally, which is puberty, and the transition from childhood into the ability to be able to bear children, which is a huge responsibility shift. And in a lot of indigenous cultures, as most of you probably know, there's a lot of different puberty ceremonies that happen that acknowledge that shifting of role and responsibility and what that really means as we go through that transition, and that, unfortunately, in a lot of communities that's been lost, though, too, even indigenous communities. And there's actually a growing movement to kind of bring back a lot of those ceremonies that come along with those acknowledgments of that changing role that we fill, as we become able to bear children. But around that time, you're going through all of the emotional and hormonal, but there's all sorts of other types of growth, I think, that we go through. And one of them is, for myself, was at least being able to begin to see who I really was, the possibility of who I could be, and a path that began to kind of show itself to me into my future. And, the path that I saw as a teenager honestly scared me. And I think that, in some ways, a lot of us end up being in that sort of a situation where we have a nervousness or a fear about, if you want to call it success, of being successful, of being able to pursue and achieve some of the dreams or some of the path that's just naturally there for us. And I was certainly one of those people. And, as a teenager, I tried to communicate with, my junior high school teachers, and I remember one of them telling me, Evon, we all have dreams and ideas that we can help change the world, but you'll grow out of it, soon, and you'll get your regular job and be like everybody. And there wasn't a lot of opportunity for me to speak to people at that time in my life about what it was that I was experiencing, and there wasn't a lot of nurturing of expanding and pursuing that path, that vision of what I saw for myself. And, and I also feared myself, and a part of that, fear of myself was knowing the experiences that I had gone through already growing up, even by that age. I had suffered different forms of neglect and abuse and hunger and all sorts of different types of experiences, and I wasn't sure if I was healthy enough, if I was grounded enough emotionally to follow a path. And the path that was laid out in front of me, of course, when I was younger, was a path of leadership, and I feared that I might do harm with what it was that I could become as a leader, and so chose to just run from it. And a part of that running was dropping out of high school and really following the path that a lot of young, the stereotypically young Native men follow. I think at the time, 70 or 80% of us dropped out of high school and ended up in jail or abusing substances, and pretty much I was following that path, not because I couldn't achieve in a Western school framework. I was actually in the honors program when I dropped out, but because it was not a fit for me. And I didn't understand why at the time, because I was young, but I just felt deeply that it wasn't for me, and I didn't fit there. And luckily I had most of my teachers agree with me. But that running from who I was a part of those years. At 17, fast-forwarding a little bit, I began to mature a little bit into understanding a bit more about the world around me, having spent a year or so out of high school by that time, getting the freedom to kind of expand my mind in my own way, my own pursuit, and came to realize that I had this power of choice, and that no matter how much I had suffered or no matter how much I had may struggle with being able to develop myself emotionally because of a lot of shutting down that had occurred in my early childhood from the experiences I had, that I could always choose on this path of developing myself, of pursuing my capacity as a person, as an artist, as a creative thinker, as a leader, or whatever I may be known as, that I could always choose to do good with who I was, that I could always choose to be as conscious as I can be in any given moment based on what I'd come to understand in my life at that point to do well. And when I realized that, I also realized that by choosing this particular path for myself, that I would have to face a pretty challenging trajectory in my life to deal with all the things I had already been through in my life that had caused me to shut down or to close up, to create a box around me, and that I would also be challenged to have to grow in many different ways in order to be able to fulfill this path that I saw for myself. But nonetheless, at 17, I realized that I either have to choose that path and embrace it fully and walk down it for my lifetime, or not. And I chose it, which is probably why I'm on this call with you all today. And that path, has led me initially to try to come to understand my own circumstances, the trajectory that had brought my life to the path that I was living, and a lot of that, tied into learning about the history of what had happened to my mother, who had been taken out to a boarding school at 5 years old in California from our tribe in northern Alaska, and why anybody thought it was a good idea to take her away from my grandparents at that time, and learning about federal Indian law and the history of the United States relationship with my people and with other indigenous peoples in North America, and also even going further back to understanding what had happened to my grandparents and my great-grandparents and the different layers of experiences that they had had, and going back even further than that to searching for understanding about the way our people understood our existence and our life as human beings in our land, in our place, through our culture, through our language, prior to contact with Western peoples even. And so a lot of my life since then has been seeking knowledge and understanding about those things and working to help not only go through my own process of healing and recovering and raising awareness, but also extending that support to others around me, primarily indigenous peoples, and in particular indigenous youth, because reflecting back to the experiences I had as a teenager, I remember thinking that I sure would have loved to have an older indigenous person to acknowledge the truth in my visions and my dreams that I had had, and to provide some sort of guidance towards my development as a person, and basically someone to say it's okay to be who you are and to develop yourself on your path and to fulfill your role in life, whatever that may be. And when I looked at that history, of what I'll call colonization, catered, the foundation of it really comes down to a controlling and a changing and a taking advantage of. And the experience of indigenous peoples, in that framework has been one, as, most of you on this call know, of figuring out how to not only control indigenous peoples, but to gain access to be able to exploit our lands, our people. But tied into that has been this process of assimilation, of trying to change fundamentally who we are as people, eradicate our traditional spiritual beliefs, our ceremonies, our dancing, our drumming, our languages, and make us become a different sort of person. And that assimilative process that and how it was implemented just caused all sorts of damage, emotionally, spiritually, culturally, socially, within our communities. And a lot of the work that I see myself doing and being involved in is about learning what it means and how to practice liberating myself from the different forms of oppression and suppression so that I can really be who I am and be able to support others to also be who they are. And I feel like, all of us are blessed with a unique role and place in the world. And, I think often that even the ordinary is miraculous, that life itself is a miracle. And whether we're performing and that miracle through parenting of our children. I have 4 children, so I know a little bit about parenting. One of them's in high school now, and the youngest one's still in diapers. But even that role of parenting and how powerful that is, or if it's leading an organization or writing a book or creating a film or whatever it is that our role is, I feel like that, as humanity, we're so out of sync with the way and the timing of nature, the way that nature moves, the way that life moves. And I think a lot of our path to healing and changing some of the systems and ways and behaviors that we have in the world today have to do with us being able to, every person, not only indigenous people, being able to more fully embrace who we are, our path, our role, overcome fear of what it might mean for us to be who we are. Because I think through that process of healing and liberating, that we naturally begin to take up our place in doing what we need to do to help our world move in a direction that it really needs to move right now, in order to avoid a lot of unnecessary suffering. I think in a lot of ways, the trajectory that I see humanity on, is fundamentally unsustainable. So it's going to, different aspects of what we're doing and how we're doing it are going to come to an end. I think we're seeing some of that with our economic system lately. But I think that we can very much minimize the amount of suffering, both of human life and other forms of life on Earth, if we can begin to make certain transitions sooner rather than later. And I think a lot of that has to do with tying back to something as simple as each of us internally beginning to make some of the changes that we need to make so that we can really step out of our comfort zones in many ways to pursue our self-healing and development, raising our awareness and allowing ourselves to naturally move into the places that we need to move into. And I've been on this path since I was 17, and now that's, 18 years ago. So I know that sounds short probably to some of you and long to others, but it's been, truly a blessed path that I feel like I've gotten to live in life. And almost every day I find myself in a new situation or in a new role or carrying a new title that I never expected myself to have. But if it feels right, then I accept it. If the invitation feels right, then I accept it. If it doesn't feel right, then I don't. I feel like, rather than try to keep up with the pace of a world around me that's moving at an unsustainable and unhealthy pace, it's probably better off for me to take my time and find my way in a way that fits what it is that I'm trying to work to help bring about in the world. I'm not 100% proficient at that yet by any means, but I feel like I'm walking down that road and doing better with each year that I walk it. And I think that's enough of me sharing to start off this call today. And with that, maybe I'll pass it over to Jennifer to open it up for some questions.
Thanks, Evon. That was very inspiring. I really appreciated the background of your learning journey and how it got you to where you are. And I'm really thrilled by your involvement with the Thrive film, and I bet a lot of callers have seen the film and your piece in it. We're going to move into questions now, and if anything came up for you in Evon's talk right now, I know some of you have posted questions on the forum, and some of you have also posted a few questions or comments in the Maestro page here. Or if you just have any comments, basically we're going to open it up for comments or questions right now. So what I would like you to do is raise your hand number 2 if you're feeling called to speak right now, and I would happily call out your name and hand it over to you. I'll turn your mic on, and then Evon will respond.
Also, not only questions, but if there's any short comments that anybody would like to make as well. I mentioned earlier in the call that I enjoy dialogue, and so if there's anyone that has any comment that they would like to make, short comments though, of course, so we can keep the call going.
Great, and if you could press your number 2 key now, that would be great. If, for example, someone does start, we can try to keep your questions or comments to about a minute. That would be ideal, so that we have enough time for hearing as many people as we can. I'll ring a bell if you start going into 2 or 3 minutes, just to make sure we're succinct with that. Okay, thanks everyone. We'll just keep that rolling. If at any point you have a question, press the number 2 key. So Tess, I'm going to turn your mic on. What is your comment or question? Tess, your mic on.
Can you hear me? Oh, yes. Well, first I want to say thank you. It's really beautiful to hear your story, and it's really beautiful to hear my path a lot of similar insight. It's really good to hear being a white woman. It's nice to hear you share similar things. The question that I have is related to how you were saying you spoke a lot about discovering ourselves and doing what it is that we're meant to do, following our path and providing that work for the world or the earth. And I want to hear what you think about how we can influence other people to do that same thing. And I've noticed a lot in my path that it's hard to change other people, and I can't make that decision for other people, but I want to inspire people to follow their own path. So I'd love to hear any reflections on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first of all, you're absolutely right. We can't change anybody but ourselves. I think that, oftentimes in my life I found myself in various different situations. Some are relaxed and simple and less stressful, such as giving a talk on a webinar to a bunch of people who are likely have somewhat of a like-mindedness and are interested in pursuing a certain trajectory in life and work and change. And then others can be as complex as in situations, for example, where I've been in political leadership and have been at complete odds with another very influential political figure and leader, and had to navigate the conflict of the conversation. And I think that each situation is different. And I think in the course of my life, I've found myself as I get older, anyways, becoming more and more clear about what's acceptable behavior to be happening around me in my physical presence. And if certain things happen that aren't really acceptable, I'll do an intervention. I'll, break a silence or approach somebody and have a communication with them, even knowing that it's highly likely that it will result in some form of conflict. But I think that, conflict is actually a natural part of human experience. And in some ways, I feel like in American society, we avoid a lot of conflicts or create unnecessary conflicts. and I think that we really need to grow into a place of becoming clear when it's important for us to be standing our ground, even when our ideas or thoughts are at odds with another person's ideas or thoughts, to be able to have that tension and to have the dialogue. I think that some of the greatest learning that occurs for me actually happens where I have really great dialogues with people that might not necessarily agree with what it is that I have to say or think, but I'm able to learn from them and understand from them a little bit more about where it is that they're coming from in their thinking, and in that way I become more capable of working with people that are coming from a similar foundation of thinking the next time that I give a speech or the next time that I do my work. But fundamentally, I think that when we operate from a place of empathy, compassion, and understanding for others, then we're able to engage them well. I think that, for myself, I am sensitive to how I'm feeling and doing. So if in a dialogue or conversation with somebody, I sense myself becoming really frustrated and angry or tensed up, I tend to slow down. That's a good sign for me to slow down with whatever it is that I might say, to understand and think about why it is that I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling, and then also being able to have, to the best of my ability, every word that comes out of my mouth or every action that I take be supportive of moving the conversation and then us in a positive direction towards a positive outcome. And that's, very challenging to do, and I think that over the years, it's a process of cultivating that. I mean, I've had situations where, there's the last example I'll give with this, where, someone was very, very angry with me and yelling at me in my face for 5-10 minutes, and I realized at the time that any response that I gave wouldn't produce any positive result, and so I just sat in silence and listened. And at the end, I let them know, I heard you. And several hours later, that person returned to me with a gift and apologizing, recognizing that I wasn't the one who was making them so mad, that they had other issues going on, but that I was a great target because I am an outspoken person, because I am a leader within certain communities, and so I think that that's a part of life. But I think that with it's a balancing act through life to do that. But I definitely feel like it's so important for us to be continuing on that path of developing ourselves, our grounding, to our values, to the land, so that we can be able to weather some of the hardships and challenges that come. And I think that each time we go through an experience like that, we can grow from that and become a little bit more clear as we move forward.
Great. So again, if anyone just joined us, if you could press 2 for our question round, that indicates that your hand is raised. And I see a few hands up right now. So Darwin C. is how you're registered in the Maestro platform. I'm going to go ahead and turn your mute on. Okay, so Darwin.
Yeah, hey, can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. This is cool because I also live in Alaska. I'm not sure if you still do or not. Do you?
Yeah, I'm right up here in 40 below Fairbanks right now.
No, right on. I'm out in Esther, right outside Fairbanks. People that don't know. Watching Thrive was really cool because it got me thinking about lots of action steps, and one of those was networking with people. I'm really trying to network with people up here in Fairbanks, but lots of times I get kind of discouraged, whether it's because, the education system I went through up here was kind of a downer, and I guess I feel kind of left out of the groove up here because I didn't get into the traditional knowledge that like say that you did up in the villages up there, and I'm just wondering if I can have some advice about how to network up here and make some good changes up here in Alaska.
Wow, that's a big question. Alaska specific, I have all sorts of ideas. I don't really want to use the time to get specific about Alaska and what's happening in Alaska, the different, organizations or individuals that are involved in work. To speak to the question kind of more broadly, I would say that, most of the things that I've been involved in, most of the projects, most of the initiatives have all started small, with a conversation with somebody, with a thought or an idea that I kind of got excited about or built some passion around, and then I'd go out and try it. And, I can't tell you over the course of my life how many different, initiatives, projects. There's several organizations a few that I attempted to start that didn't go anywhere, a few that actually grew some legs and were able to do some really great work, in Alaska or nationally. But each one has been a learning experience, to grow from and to be able to then take some of that understanding and put it into the next initiative or the next project. And I think that that's the nature of how things get started. And another thing that I'll just share is that, I found that, people in general are really interested in becoming involved in initiatives and projects where they feel like there's going to be a real solid follow-through and implementation of taking, those ideas and putting them into action. And I think that, my advice, I guess, if you'd call it that, is, for people who are on the beginning of their trajectory of trying to offer into their communities or families or the world some of what they have to offer, is to begin with something. Focus on it and develop it and give it a try. Give it a real honest opportunity to develop into something for a while and see what you're able to produce, because I think that people around in communities notice what we're doing, and each time that we have something that's a success that impacted some people's lives, or built a garden on a corner, or put up a more sustainable home or energy efficient home, people take notice, and then it begins to build into something more solid.
Cool, great, thank you.
And hook up with me on Facebook, and we can talk a little more since we're neighbors.
Excellent. All right.
Great. Thank you, Darwin and Tess, so far. Those were great questions, very, very personal, and what you can do in your own communities and world. Okay, so a few more questions here. How about we'll go with Anne Brackett. I'm going to turn your mic on. Okay, it's on. Go for it.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much. This is so great. I'm in Northern California, and I'm starting to cry because here we all are. What I want to say is kind of a comment to the last caller and to Evon, to everyone. I'm 62, and I started working on the world and myself when I was young, in the 20s, the Vietnam War, et cetera, civil rights, and worked very hard for a very long time, and then it seemed to fade. And my personal life and raising children distracted me, and when I looked up again, everything seemed so much worse. Everything seemed so dire, and nobody seemed awake. And that the way I was keeping myself awake was with anger and with judgment. And it was exhausting and painful and obviously negative. I then had a divorce and a very bad heart attack. And I was ready to go. I was only 56, but I was ready. It was okay. And as I was lay on my bathroom floor trying to die, actually, a voice said to me when I asked, is there anything left for me to do? A voice said, what do you think? Now, it took me about a year to get over the heart attack. I'm back, and I come into full health again, even though they say I lost half my heart. I can't tell I lost half my heart. And my goodness, we're all here. We're working again. We're alive again. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And I belong to 2 Occupy groups because it's very easy where I live to do that. And we take on a specific chunk right now. It's helping people not lose their homes. It's trying to get the city to move their money from Bank of America. But that's really not it. It's waking up and finding us. I can't tell you how much it means to me. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Well, I just want to share, well, we're all glad that you made it through that moment on your bathroom floor and that you're here with us. And I think it's awesome. And that energy, that life force, if you want to call it, that flows through every single one of us as people is such a powerful thing. And it can be used for good or bad, I mean, there's when, we're told as Native people that our way of utilizing spirituality or understanding our spiritual experience on life and our expression of that through ceremony, dance, song, our language, prayer, all those things were innately evil or wrong. And they pointed to the use of some Native people who might have been utilizing some of that power, that strength, that knowledge, that awareness towards negative ends. But really that's the truth for all human beings in all of our cultures. Anyone who's pursuing or raising a level of awareness and understanding naturally gains positions of influence and power, and we have that choice of how we're to utilize that. But since I was very young, I felt that life force flowing through me very strongly, and I've one of the greatest challenges of my life is how to take that energy, that passion, that love that I feel inside of me and translate that into action and work in the world that people can feel and help inspire and bring about changes. If it can help save a young person's life who's thinking about suicide, or if it can inspire another person to, pursue their dream to build their own home from local materials or whatever it is, then, I want to be able to be one channel of being able to share some of that inspiration, that energy that's there. And, and hearing you talk, it just reminded me of how powerful that is and can be for so many people. And I think that, for a lot of people, especially North Americans or people from, especially North Americans, I think that the process is going to feel like dying when they're letting go of some of the things that they've become so comfortable with as a way of life, as a way of existing, as they shed some of that and open up to the world as it really is, which is not a perfect place. It has a lot of challenges, a lot of suffering in it, but is liberating at the same time and moving into that sort of a place. And I think that's really, a lot of the change that's needed has to begin internally within each and every one of us, and then it gets to be manifested externally through our actions, our projects, our initiatives, our relationships with each other. And it's, in many cases, one person at a time, and I think that this is one of the first times that I've spoken publicly in several years, actually, because I really wanted to put my attention back to the young people in our remote villages and tribes in Alaska, put my time one-on-one with people, and this year I realized that I was ready to kind of come back out a little bit more publicly to share some of my thinking and reflections and with others. So anyway, so thank you for your sharing. That was very, very powerful.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anne. That was very powerful and meaningful, I think, to a lot of us, including myself personally. I've been having some health concerns, and it just really puts you in a place of questioning what is this all about and what am I contributing and what am I experiencing in life. So thanks for your open, honest comments, energy, and inspiration. Okay, next question we'll have Julian. You've had your hand up for a good while. You still have a question? Your mic's on. How about we'll skip that for right now, and we'll go up to Carl Ivy.
Hello, am I live?
Yep, you're live now.
Yeah, I'm on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, although I was U.S. born. And I think I might be the senior person on this call. I happen to be 66, but I feel like I'm in my 20s and 30s.
Nice.
I never felt more alive and had more energy and blessed with wonderful, vibrant health. I'm a retired physician. Please don't hold it against me. However, that's what I did for 30 years, and I retired in 2004, and since that time I've been committed to helping people create the health that they deserve and desire without prescription drugs and those kinds of things. I want to acknowledge you, Evon, for your wisdom. If I've done the math correctly, you must be in your mid-30s, 35, 36?
Yeah, I'm 35.
Yeah, which is the age that Mozart made the transition. But you have a tremendous amount of wisdom, so I honor you for that. And then also Anne, and thank you for sharing your story, Anne, and your history as you related a lot of the anger. Well, I don't know if a lot of the listeners are aware, but anger and hostility are commonly associated with heart blockages. So keep this in mind, because when we have anger, hostility, we create resistance, and we block the flow, literally and figuratively, metaphorically. Mother Teresa said something that's very timely. She said, "Don't ever be against anything." Mother Teresa refused to participate in an anti-war march, but she was at the head of the line in a pro-peace march. So let us not waste our energy being against anything in the outer physical world. That's disempowering, and it expands that which we don't want. But let's be the change that we want to be in the world, as Gandhi said. The world needs more love and less fear, because there are only two emotions, and this is what I've learned in my 66 years. There's the emotion of love, and then the polar opposite of love is not anger or hate or greed. It is fear. And that's it. As we become more loving, we illuminate the world and promote healing. And if we are driven or allow ourselves to be driven by fear, which is a false perception, then we contract, constrict, and we become less and less powerful. So it's that simple and that profound. Let's learn to love yourselves more and more every moment. Be selfish in this sense. Start with learning to love and honor and respecting yourself, and then you will have high-quality love to give to others and to the planet. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to great comments, first of all. And, and I also want to say that, when speaking to some of the past people who, brought about some of these changes and done some of this work, while Gandhi's, I think you mentioned him, his work was very much nonviolent and not trying to be necessarily against things, but for things that would naturally dissolve kind of something that was unhealthy that was occurring with the colonization from the British on India by producing their own salt, by producing their own materials for their own clothing. So taking actions that were positive actions that fundamentally, though, undermine the power of an unhealthy force that was being perpetuated against them. And I think that, it's important to understand, as in particular for people who are in positions of leadership and influence and are perceived in that way by others around them, that there are very real consequences to making those sorts of decisions. And yesterday when I was reflecting on Martin Luther King Jr., or even Gandhi, or if you want to go back as far as to Jesus, oftentimes, leaders, and not even people, many of whom don't have big names like those people all around the world who, daily from a source of love and understanding are taking actions that undermine individuals or institutions that are manifesting an unhealthy power or control over them, have to be ready to meet the very real potential consequences of those actions. And I think that's also a natural part of our growth that we go through, and so that we can make clear decisions, conscious decisions for ourselves. And and so I just wanted to add that into the mix of our conversation.
Great. So looking at our time, I think we have one more question that we have time for, or comment, and that lucky person is going to be Billa. So Billa, I'm going to turn your mic over. Evon, you can answer this one, and then, take another 5 minutes to kind of wrap up our call. That would be great. Billa, your mic is on.
Hi, I'm calling from Costa Rica. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Evon. Thanks, Jennifer. It's just coming to my mind that, I feel like the major problem on the planet and within us is the problem of separation and being separated from what's truly natural and what creation really is, separated from ourselves, from our spirit, from the earth and all of this. So I've found over my career that the things that reconnect us are the most powerful, and whether we do that locally or within ourselves or in our, communities. And I'm just wondering, Evon, what you think about the idea of, on the planet right now, given the kind of acceleration of, holding on to the old ways and certain things that are going on. Is it important in your mind that we feel connected globally to a common vision and are networking on a global front, as in Occupy, and even, going another step further, and I'm totally in alignment with your philosophies on working from the inside out, and that's my pathway as well, and what I share with people. But I'm kind of torn at the moment because I'm totally focusing on building an eco community down here in Costa Rica, and separate from what's going up on the U.S. and from the globe in a lot of ways, because we're in the wild here. But I'm just wondering what you feel about that, about having a common vision, given that this call's related to the Thrive movie and so forth, and what's happened with Occupy on the planet.
I think that's a perfect segue into my closing comments for the call, and just to share. I mean, it's probably one of the more, not necessarily worded in that way, but it's one of the more common questions. I think that especially in the last 4 months, more and more people have been reaching out to just hear some of my reflections on. I had one of the visions that I had as a teenager, and this was before I even made a decision to kind of follow the path that I'm on, was I had this, I'll call it a vision, I guess, for a lack of a better word, but I had this gut feeling, I guess, maybe I'll call it that all around the world at that point in time, there were people who were being born into this world very similar to myself, people who had a deep connection to their humanity, to their an understanding of the significance of the importance of the connection to the land, to their environment, and very, very dedicated to seeing through the major changes that our world was greatly in need of manifesting, of coming into being. And I remember feeling that very strongly. And when I became a chief for my people, I was 24 years old, and I remember as I was entering into that kind of role, which was pretty overwhelming, especially in the first year because I was so young. When I see a 24-year-old now, I just think, good God, what were my people thinking? But it was one of the experiences in my life that I suffered, in that, especially in that first year of coming to terms with the level of responsibility culturally, socially among my people, but then externally in dealing with the state and federal governments that I had taken on. But when I look back on it, I see it as just one of those steps that was important for me to take in my life, one of those roles that I needed to fill for some period of time, at least in that political context, to grow and to understand things from a different angle that I really needed to understand, that of a political leader, and understanding a little bit more about how the political systems operate and function, how politics function. But when I got transitioned in that role, I began to build connection to other young leaders all around the world. And we hosted gatherings and retreats, if you want to call it for lack of a better word, in places in Africa and India and Central and South America, and we spent about a decade building different sorts of workshops and sessions, garnering the best from our own cultures and traditions and practices and working with one another. And during that time, as we've got to build kind of these global networks of young leaders around the world, I began to see that, it was naturally unfolding that there was similar sorts of understanding and passion and people stepping into roles of leadership just organically or naturally occurring around the world. And it gave me a lot of faith in the fact that what's happening right now is a part of that, is a part of a much more broader awakening and maturing of, whether it's in movements like the Occupy movement or whether it's in some of the social unrest, if you want to call it that, in the Middle East that's occurring. It's going to continue to unfold in that sort of way as people begin to realize that we really do need to take action upon what it is that we're coming to understand, and some of the action, but it has to be generated from good sources, not out of an anger, hatred, or frustration, or need for revenge, or anything like that. Because as Carl mentioned, that just more fire on a fire feeds the fire to grow bigger, rather than shifting it towards something else. And so I think that each of us has this unique role, and I can never say it might be someone's role to have whoever's vision was, for example, a group of people to create the World Social Forum that started some years ago, that brought together people from around the world, from grassroots organizations and institutions, to learn from one another and build relationships and to build a global network, based on people that want to see some fundamental changes occur to legal, economic, social, medical, you name it, the gamut of institutions that are now kind of governing our reality as human beings, and understanding that there's some fundamental flaws in those institutions and changes need to take place in order for us to survive, really, within humanity. And I think that, I have faith that things are happening in the way that they need to be happening, but in order for them to continue, we have to all be stepping fully into the role that we are to fill in this work. And so that's, I'm doing my part, and my hope is that everybody else gets to do their part, and in the midst of that also gets to experience the real blessing and freedom that there is in this lifetime, through that which we're choosing, to do and how we're choosing to live. Because it's an incredible blessing, I think, to get to just be alive, to get to do whatever it is that we are doing. And so I think that, I'll leave it at that. And I think that it's incredible how interconnected the world really is at this point in time, because of the Internet in particular, and a lot of the different programs and initiatives that are blossoming almost daily at this point in time, and different forms of communication that are emerging. And so it's exciting, and my sense is that in the coming year to few years, we're going to start seeing a new generation of leaders being called upon to step up into their full roles globally. And maybe it's 5 years out, I don't know. I'm not really going to put any yearly projection on it, but my sense is people are going to start seeking out people who have done the work, the internal work, for long enough to be at a place to be able to provide some very sound and grounded leadership that will help guide us through some very trying times that are, we're already living through the midst of right now. And so with that, I want to thank everyone again for being on the call. I've certainly enjoyed hearing the questions and from you, and I hope that it was a valuable use of those of you who have been on here for your time to be a part of the call, and wish you all blessings on your path and the work that you're doing. And if we ever cross paths, you can come up and introduce yourself to me, and let me know how we cross paths, I guess, even though it was over a webinar. So thank you all, very much.
Thank you so much, Evon. I really resonated with your closing reflections and the leadership that's coming up right now and how we're all connected. And really, with connection in mind, I really appreciate how personal you've been sharing with us all and your history, where you're headed right now and what's alive in you at the present moment, too. So for our closing, I want to hand it back over to Kirsten of Gaia University for a few words about Gaia University's upcoming calls. Thank you all. Mic's on.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Evon. That was truly a blessing, and I love when you said it's a blessing to be alive right now, and I so concur with you on that. We have such an opportunity right now to step into our passions and to step into onto the path of creating the world that we want to see. So thank you for that, and thank you for focusing on internal change, on the positive action plus the importance of internal change. We've so focused over the last decades, millennia, on, changing others, blaming others, and to really change the world by changing ourselves is the key now. So thank you. Just wanted to remind everybody the audio for this call will be available on the Gaia e-learning site that you all signed into. And if any of you want to continue the discussion on the forum, that's where you can do that. The forum space that is in the same course that we set up. So feel free to continue the discussion there, and we will let you know when the audio is available. I just wanted to quickly remind you again that on January 27th, noon Eastern Time, we will have a virtual open house for Gaia University, and we will be putting out an announcement for that. So if you're interested in learning more about Gaia University itself, that would be a great opportunity to join in on that call. It'll have some advisors and people who are teaching the courses, so you can really get a good idea about that. And then finally, our next upcoming Thrive Now webcast will be February 21st, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, and it will be with Akila Sharilis. And we will be sending out information on that both through the Thrive Network as well as through our Gaia University Network. So again, I want to thank all of you for participating in this call, and for those of you who asked your questions, very wonderful call, and I wish you all an incredible evening and a wonderful rest of the week. May it be better than you could ever imagine. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Kira. I'm going to turn everyone's mic on. If you want to yell a shout-out to Evon, go for it. Great. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Love all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Thank you.